Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I have Julie Daniluk, a colleague, friend, and author of two amazing books. One that has reserved a spot on my shelf now permanently, Meals That Heal Inflammation, which I use quite a bit, and newly, Slimming Meals That Heal, which we're going to talk about today. So, Julie, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm ecstatic to talk to you, Josh. You're so smart, and you always bring the greatest questions. So I can't wait to share the deep nitty gritty on Slimming Meals That Heal.
Great, great. I'm excited to hear about it. So I just want to first tell you that I have to credit you for one of my most amazing nutritional discoveries, and that was eating asparagus raw.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you introduced that to me. So now that we got that out of the way, let's start right on the first page, which is the cover. And it says, your subtitle is Lose Weight Without Dieting Using Anti-Inflammatory Superfoods. So my question is, how are anti-inflammatory superfoods going to help people lose weight?
Well, there's such a tie between inflammation and weight gain that we can reverse the dietary damage by using incredibly powerful superfoods that contain amazing nutrients that are able to quench the fire of inflammation. And by reducing inflammation, we're actually able to help us balance out our hormones. And through hormonal balance, we're able to really speed up metabolism and lose weight without caloric restriction. Because let's face it, diets fail because they're completely impossible to maintain. It's like an artificial food prison that you can't wait to break out of. And that's why anything more than 2 weeks and you're going completely squirrely. So that's what's so freeing about the beauty in Slimming Meals That Heal. And I really love that there's a movement going on. If we look at Megan's book, your wife's book, Undiet, if we look at Joyous Health, there's a real strong messaging coming from holistic nutritionists that we really want to embrace a lifestyle shift versus dieting. And I think that this is key for people's long-term health. Because now we know that the data's out. The UCLA review of diets showed that 66% of people not only will gain back the weight that they lost on a diet, but they end up gaining even more weight. And that's a wonderful review of 31 different popular diets. So we now see whether it's low carb, whether it's low calorie, whether it's low fat, it doesn't matter. It's restriction, and that restriction creates that brain fear and rebellion, and eventually you bust out. So that's why I'm so excited about bringing more of these delicious recipes to the forefront.
Great. And I understand, like you obviously pick on weight a little bit, and you mentioned it a number of times, and that's kind of gets people going. But would you agree that weight gain is more of a symptom rather than something we need to focus, more of like an end stream effect rather than something upstream?
Absolutely. And that's why the anti-inflammatory plan works, because yes, weight gain is purely a body's response to major inflammation. If we look at the causes of inflammation, which I covered off in my first book, Meals That Heal, I've now boiled it down to 4 major causes of inflammation. You have infections, you have injuries, both emotional and physical, you have your hormonal imbalances or nutritional imbalances, and you have your major irritations caused by toxins in your environment or food allergies. And if we take a look at these and really see that weight gain is purely a response to these causes of inflammation, then by switching off the causes of inflammation and really repairing the body through these anti-inflammatory superfoods, we see the weight loss as a side benefit. Instead of the focus, it's a side benefit of actually truly hitting our equilibrium. I like to call it the vitality weight. It's not a weight established on a scale by some Hollywood starlet that's totally unattainable. Your vitality weight is purely something that makes you feel your best. that when you're in your own skin, you feel you have tons of energy, you have an incredible ability to be positive, and you make your food choices purely because you know that really is going to nourish and regenerate you, instead of the food cravings that end up just making you feel horrible the next day. So I'm so excited that this has multiple benefits, and the side benefit being weight loss.
I love that. I mean, just being happy with your kind of set point weight. And, you know, obviously there's a certain measure of like being too heavy or not heavy enough, and there's some wiggle room in the middle. And a lot of what I do with my clients is I look to see like, where are they in that middle ground? Are they healthy, first of all? And then second of all, are they okay with that weight? So it's about a relationship with the body as well. But you mentioned allergies. I want to, you know, allergies are everywhere. There's a lot of misconception about allergies. How does allergies affect the body?
Well, what is fascinating, Josh, is when you eat a food you're allergic to, you have a massive rise in your stress hormones. And that's life-saving. If we look at an EpiPen saving the life of a child with a peanut allergy, an EpiPen is full of adrenaline. And it's a massive antihistamine. And it helps the body suppress an allergic reaction. So every single time you eat something you're allergic to, and it could be something that you're not even aware of, it may be a delayed intolerance versus an acute allergy, you have this release of adrenaline, you have a release of cortisol, and that is the leading cause of weight gain. And that's the simple way of explaining why your food allergies cause you to gain weight, because by constantly having that release of cortisol, you're going to also have a release of insulin, and that's like a megaphone that says, pack on the pounds, we got to put it somewhere. So we're going to unfortunately not be able to access our actual body fat and free it up to be burned as fuel if we constantly eat the foods we're allergic to, even if we're on a very calorically restricted diet. So that's the fascinating thing. Even if you eat 2 pieces of toast and a bowl of yogurt per day, if you're allergic to dairy and to wheat, I don't care how hard you're trying, it's going to be very difficult to lose weight. Even if you're a virtual nil with your calories. Like I've met people, a lot of people submit their diet diaries to me, and when I'm in a consultation, I'll go, I can't believe this person's eating like 1,000 calories a day, and they're still 250 pounds.
Right.
So we have to delve underneath the hormonal imbalance and get to that, and that's when we really see results.
That's a great clinical pearl. Like if you're doing all the right stuff and you feel like you're still holding on the weight, examine your food a little closer. You know, see if you're allergic to something. So maybe, first of all, what are the top foods to take out if you're like, okay, I'm going to start this allergy investigation? You know, where do I begin? How should people get started on this?
Well, in Slimming Meals That Heal, I have the worst offenders in red. Those are the foods that we know cause inflammation. And then I have a yellow list. So I think of it like a stop sign. We've got our red list foods that like, please get off them because we know they're highly inflammatory. And then our yellow list foods are things to be cautionary about, to consider, to pull out of the diet and then put them back in again, to be your own Sherlock Holmes and be a food detective with your food journal. So I love using software like MyFitnessPal, or there's a great food journal in my book, Slimming Meals That Heal, and you just chart down the foods that you're eating and then how you feel about the foods that you're eating, because you cannot go by the food directly after you eat it. Unfortunately, if you're allergic to it, you're going to have a big, huge waft of adrenaline, and we're all adrenaline junkies. So let's face it, initially you're going to feel great when you eat something you're allergic to, especially if it's wheat, because wheat triggers opiate receptors in the brain. So you're going to feel great. So that's one concern of mine, is that we want to make sure that people follow up that initial high and get in touch with how they feel the next day, because that's often a true representation. If you have pizza and wine with the girls and you wake up the next morning and you feel like you've been run over by a Mack truck, let's dissect that, because unfortunately pizza has 5 things you might be sensitive to, and the wine you could certainly be sensitive to. So that's why I encourage people to pull out the major culprits, which are wheat, dairy, sugar, corn, white potatoes. Those are the biggies that we know are causing a lot of sensitivities. And then, you know, within the yellow list, are you sensitive to eggs? Are you sensitive to nuts? Because there's some in there that we have to be mindful of. And then really look even to sugar. I have to tell you, my biggest kryptonite is sugar, Josh. If I have sugar, it does something to my neural net. Some people are highly intolerant to sucrose. We have to remember it's a disaccharide, and we have to split that apart. And we may not have the digestive fire in order to do so. I've had ulcerative colitis, so I have weak microvilli that don't really emit a lot of the digestive enzymes required to split disaccharides. So I want people to really figure it out for themselves by using a food journal system. And what I do with the book is I kind of lay it out here. If you could go off these foods for the 8 weeks and then put one food back in a week, instead of, oh, I'm off the diet, I'm like binge on everything I've ever wanted to eat. I really say, let's take it slowly. Let's put one food back in, watch. 3 days later, take the same food, hit yourself again with a really serious amount of it, because we want to have a big impact to the immune system, and then watch and see whether you have that allergy flare. And what are you looking for? You're looking for irritability. You're looking for depression. You're looking for negative self-talk. A lot of the brain inflammation is some of the biggest, most important symptoms to look out for. You're also looking for blushing on your cheeks, because the histamine response will create red ears or red cheeks. You're also going to look for dark circles. You're going to look for digestive distress, whether it be bloating, or whether it be gas, or whether it be diarrhea, or whether it be constipation. These are all great indicators that you're actually allergic to the food.
Yeah, so I mean, it could be so many different things. And I find that with my clients, the ones who are committed and persevere and say, you know, I'm not going to stop until I solve this thing, solve the thing, you know, and they get there. So I want to just move on to the difference between glycemic load and glycemic index, which you get into quite a bit of detail, I believe on page 67, you start to go through, and you have a chart, and it's great. But there's benefits and sort of limitations to each. So could you please explain those?
Absolutely. So the glycemic index is one of my favorite inventions. It was invented in 1981 right here at the University of Toronto. And it's just fascinating because it helps people understand how fast a food raises their personal blood sugar. So they took 50 grams of a certain food and they measure it in a healthy individual basically against glucose. So they take glucose as 100 and they take water as 0. And they rate the food between 0 and 100 on how fast that food raises your personal blood sugar. The limitation of it is a lot of times you don't eat 50 grams of that particular food. So it ended up demonizing certain foods that looked high on the glycemic index, but because they were calorically low, watermelon, carrots, you end up actually looking like the food is negative. It's close to sugar when in fact it's not. So glucose being 100, the biggest culprits are potatoes and bread. Those actually tip the scales at close to 100. I think potatoes are about 98. Certain breads are 100. Like they really are as impactful to your personal blood sugar as eating pure gummy bears, like pure glucose syrup. So that's one thing that I really get is as we get people off white bread, and that's why, or any sort of bread, to be honest, that's why Wheat Belly has had such mass success in the United States. It was just one statement, get off of wheat. And that was enough to have people lose 20, 30, 40 pounds. So this glycemic index is beautiful, but it demonizes healthy foods. So the beauty of introducing the glycemic load, which really shows the average amount that the person eats, allows people to get a reality check on whether that is a negative food or not. So with something like watermelon, which is extremely calorically low, if you think of like the average serving is about 25 calories. So it's so calorically low that you're able to have that. And even though it technically can spike your blood sugar, because it's calorically low, it's not going to impact you nearly as horribly as eating a calorically dense food like white potatoes or white bread or anything that's very heavy in carbohydrates. So that's what I love about combining the glycemic index and the glycemic load, is if you sort of see both of them and create a bit of a mental average, you're able to truly navigate what foods are best for you. And if you can really keep that in mind, and also just keep in mind to slow down carbs that you're enjoying, because I'm not saying you can never have a dense carbohydrate again. We need comfort foods. If we don't have them, we get sad. So I want you to have them. I just want you to eat them with that awareness that we want to combine those foods with things that are lower on the glycemic index, so that we can ensure that your blood sugar doesn't go too high. Because that's the number one reason why you have inflammation, and the number one reason why people gain weight is their blood sugar is running out of control.
Mm-hmm. And tell me about vinegar, because I'm always when I read a book, I'm always looking for like the key things that are going to give you your biggest bang for your buck. So tell me about that. And
I use a lot of vinegar in my recipes and a lot of lemon juice in my recipes, because it turns out sour reduces the glycemic index of the food, which is incredible. So by pairing vinegar with something that you're absolutely in love with, i.e. popcorn, you're able to reduce the glycemic index reaction to that food, and all of a sudden you can handle it better. And it's so important. So please, if you're enjoying a carbohydrate, consider what sort of sour thing can I pair it with? Or can I have a glass of apple cider vinegar cocktail, which is naturally sparkling water with some apple cider vinegar added to it. And I say naturally sparkling because I know, Josh, you know all of this stuff, and I got to be really specific, because naturally sparkling means that it comes out of the ground sparkling, versus artificial carbonation, which will potentially cause harm to our gastrointestinal tract. So if it comes out of the ground naturally sparkling, and we add a little bit of apple cider vinegar, and we sip that before meals, we're going to be able to lower the glycemic index of our meal, so that we don't have that insulin reaction that's causing our weight gain.
Simple but effective. You mentioned popcorn, and when I think of popcorn, I think of butter. And
yes.
And you mentioned that that's one of the things you want to avoid in the book, butter. What about ghee?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I really am in love with ghee. I do love ghee, and I really love ghee from goats, because goat ghee or sheep ghee, which is even harder to find because it's almost impossible to find a sheep ready to give up that much butter. But you can find goat butter, and then you would separate that out on the stove. It's very simple to do, and you just wait for all of the you're waiting for the lactose and the casein to separate off the dairy oil. So I don't have a big beef with dairy oil. It's just the fact that the average dairy is riddled with problems now. So that's why when we're trying to encourage someone to lose weight, we don't want more hormone disruption, because we have to remember that the hormones are hormones being very closely related to cholesterol. By having a concentration of dairy fat, we could be carrying a lot of the toxins from that cow in with the dairy. So I only want someone, if they really are looking for that dairy hit, to use organic ghee or goat ghee, because I know that the health of the animal will be so much better, and the health of the animal will translate to better hormonal balance for you. So we want to separate off the casein and the lactose that's going to sink to the bottom and rise to the top, so you can skim it off and then just have that beautiful layer of ghee and enjoy that. Yeah, absolutely. But in moderation. And the reason why is because animal fats are high in arachidonic acid, and as a scientist, you understand arachidonic acid is the driver of inflammation. It's the key messenger that makes up the prostaglandin 2 series. So we want to be careful to not go crazy on ghee. We want to focus on the beautiful saturated fats that do not enter that pathway, and the key one being our coconut oil. Because funnily enough, arachidonic acid is actually a omega-6 oil, where coconut oil is virtually completely a saturated fat. So we have the least inflammation issues with coconut. And that's why on my personal popcorn, I use coconut butter. And the coconut butter has the protein in it, and it's got a richness of flavor that's ridiculous. And so I kind of very gently melt that down because it's easy to burn because there's protein in it. And then I add some nutritional yeast to that, and it really does taste like butter. It's so delicious. So that's my substitution.
That's a great idea. I love coconut butter. It's like icing, but
yes,
that little addition sounds delicious. Okay. Dopamine. I was reading through the recipes, and food is medicine. So there's this great recipe on page 189 using fava beans. Tell me about fava beans and dopamine.
Yeah, well, fava beans provide the right amino acid profile to help you make more dopamine, which is incredible. We have to remember that serotonin is our safety hormone, but dopamine is our reward joy hormone. It's what makes, that's what people fly on when they do adrenaline seeking activity, right? So if we have something that increases our joy factor, then we're truly going to be more enrolled in the live it, which is my anti-inflammatory replacement for the diet. Right. So I really encourage people to reach for foods that are going to increase their dopamine naturally. And that's really your protein sources. And that's why I find it critical in Slimming Meals That Heal to include lots of great protein options. And I'm really feeling for those vegans out there, because vegans are challenged to get enough amino acids. And I know this is a great debate. And if you know, we had some raw foodists on here, they'd be like holding me to task. We don't need that much protein. But for a person who's really weight challenged, we know that protein is an amazing satiation tool. We know that it also helps to build lean muscle, and it also helps to, it's the building block for our thyroid hormones and for our neurotransmitters. So I really encourage people to get enough protein, and the fava bean recipe is so delicious and a wonderful way to really have it all, to have the flavor and to have the results that you're after.
Okay, awesome. And I completely agree with you on that protein situation. I mean, you know, very hard to get on a vegan diet. Let's do a little summary of some of your favorite things from your book. Maybe the key 3 takeaways that you would like to leave people with from your book.
Okay. Well, one thing is when you look at people and they have achieved a health goal of some kind, I just want you to imagine that you are that person, that is totally possible for you. Because if people read my personal story and read my chapter on emotional healing, they'll understand that I actually overcame a massive eating disorder in order to really reach my true vitality. And I know that vitality is within anyone's grasp. I know that one of my top success stories is a woman by the name of Marg Stahlbaum, who lost 115 pounds without dieting and has gone on to become a personal trainer. So I do know that this works, and I just want everyone to feel that hope. There's a wonderful Arabic saying, you know, where there's health, there's hope, and where there's hope, there's everything. And I just want people to see their health as a window to everything else they want in their life. So that's a big one. The next one I would definitely say is, if you're too scared to cut anything out, that's okay. Don't start there. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't be like, because that's the diet mentality that'll trip you up. Instead, be like, okay, well, if this is a live it, then I'm on this journey for the rest of my life. So I'm just going to start with one step. And my first step is often just swapping things out. Can I make those small changes that have big results? Instead of having you know, that cold cereal that you're accustomed to, can I go look for a chia-based cereal that's going to be soul satisfying? Something like that. Right. And I think if I have one last thing to leave people with, oh Josh, there's it's just so, there's so much to say, and I'm like, oh,
I know.
I think I want people to truly know they're worth it. Know they're worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to use treats and treat yourself. Because one big thing is people think, oh, if I'm slimming, I have to be in deprivation mode. And my philosophy is actually we can expand our horizons and have incredible time with so many delicious foods from other cultures. And what we're about to do is blow the lid off your food choices. So let me give you more and have you feel like this is truly a live it. It's absolutely possible, and make it really individual for you. And please know that I love communication. I love social media, so people can keep in touch with me. On Instagram is my favorite. If you want to see what I'm eating, I post it virtually every morning. So Instagram is Julie Daniluk. Twitter's Julie Daniluk. And Facebook is Julie Daniluk Nutrition. And I post a great deal of cool, amazing recipes as well at juliedaniluk.com. So that's, I guess, my three big things. It's hard to summarize, Josh. So I'm so glad that you give me this much time.
I'm here to ask the hard questions.
Yeah, it's
so
awesome.
Great. Thank you for letting us know where we can contact you. I recommend, this book is awesome companion to this one, which I always use in my practice. And I think the whole concept of dieting and being healthy and changing your lifestyle and everything, being difficult and a trudge and painful, that's over. That's done.
Yeah.
We'll just leave that in the past. There's so many great resources out there now that just help us do it in an easy way. So thank you so much for joining us. If you want to find out more information out there and see more interviews like this, please go to joshgitalis.com. And the best way to get started is to get started. Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Josh. You are the best.